introduction, this is Julian Cribb, everyone. He's quite a prolific science journalist and science communicator. He's written, over 10 books, I think? And he's got a recent book that has come out, Surviving the 21st Century. And so that's what Julian is here to talk to us today. So I'll hand over to you, Julian, and let you get to it.
Great. Thank you very much for the opportunity. I really appreciate it. My talk today is going a lot wider than just climate. It's looking at the 10 big existential threats that constitute the greatest emergency that the human species has ever faced in its time on Earth. All of these things threaten our future existence, both as a civilization and perhaps even as a species. So let's sort of get into them. Here's a short list of the 10 big threats. Now, these came out of the fact, I'm a science writer, right? I've been talking to scientists for decades. And towards the late 1990s, early 21st century, I began bumping into more and more scientists who were very depressed about the future. They thought that humanity had more or less had it. Now, I didn't know whether they were right or wrong, but I thought it was possible as a journalist to find out by looking at the very best science and the best institutions worldwide. I could identify what the problems were and, if possible, also what the solutions were. So the result of that was this long list of problems. And the main point about this list is that they are all interconnected. You can't separate them out. You can't solve them one at a time. They have to be solved together. Together they add up to an existential emergency for humanity. And they must all be solved together, because if you solve one, you'll just make another one worse. So the solutions have to cross-cut all 10 of those risks. Okay, I'm going to run through them briefly, and it's a bit of a depressing thing, but there's light at the end of the tunnel, let me assure you of that. So first of all, we've got the wipeout of living species. I mean, 2/3 of the large animals on Earth have been eliminated since the 1970s. At the moment, humans and their livestock now make up 97% of vertebrate biomass on land on the planet. So only 3% of vertebrate biomass is actually wild animals. And that's an absolutely shocking figure. That's reversed itself in less than 100 years. But we've destroyed basically all the wild animals, and the wilderness is at great risk. And that in turn is threatening us, because we depend upon that biosphere for our own survival. Now, resources. Well, we're all conscious that we use a bit too much in the way of resources, but did you know that you use 100,000 tons of water? In the course of your lifetime, that's how much fresh water you will personally engulf. And that's every single one of the 7.8 billion people on the planet is using that amount of water. So, I mean, each of us is using enough water to float a very large aircraft carrier. Right? And so that's clearly something that can't last much longer. The human race is displacing 775 billion tons of topsoil just by feeding ourselves and developing our society. We're consuming 720 tons of metals and materials. We're consuming phenomenal amounts of energy, and we know what impacts those are having. Coal, oil, gas, all of that stuff is wrecking the place. So here's a long list. I mean, basically 13.5 tons of food is what you personally will throw in the trash in the course of your life. That's the average waste. It's 3 or 4 big truckloads of food you will throw away. This cannot continue. It's a totally unsustainable society. The picture, by the way, is just there to illustrate these long chain effects. Those are the salt lakes of the Atacama, and they used to be packed with flamingos, and they aren't packed any longer because the lithium that powers your mobile phone or your hedge trimmer or whatever it is has been taken. It's been taking the water from the salt lakes, and they've now become hypersaline. They can't support the flamingos any longer. So just buying a mobile phone, you wreck an environment somewhere far away. And we're not conscious of that. We need to be conscious of this. Okay, arms race. Well, you know, things are not looking really good on that front either. You know, you'd have thought we'd have learned something, but there's still 13,500 nukes in Exeter, and 7,500 of those are ready to go. Okay, anytime. Now, what the people who own these arsenals don't seem to understand is you only actually have to let off about 50 or 100 of them to bathe the entire planet in a nuclear winter and destroy the food supply. So, you know, if, for example, India and Pakistan came to blows, nuclear blows, over the waters of the Indus, there would be no food in Australia and no food in America. There would be you know, -2, -4 degrees of global cooling for up to 10 years, right? So even a small nuclear war would be a catastrophic event. We've now got the situation where nuclear weapons are not being commanded by people, they're being commanded by robots. What on earth could possibly go wrong with that? You know, and they're being stolen like that you wouldn't believe. You know, people are trying to arm themselves. At the moment, where, you know, the United Nations put forward a proposal to disarm the world 2 or 3 years ago. So far, only about a third of countries have signed up for it. To our undying shame, Australia supports the use of nuclear weapons. You know, so does Holland. I mean, there are all kinds of real anomalies there. Why do we support something that can and will wipe out human civilization? The Chicago group say that we're basically at the highest level of threat since their doomsday clock was established. Okay, hothouse Earth. Now, you're all climate experts, so I don't need to tell you very much about this. But bottom line is, you know, we're on track for 2 degrees. Nothing much we can do about that at this point. It's locked in. The CO2 is already up there, or it's coming out very, very fast. What I want to focus on a little bit is the methane bomb. I mean, basically, all that hot weather, you know, those glorious hot days they've been having in Siberia has been unleashing the methane. And methane is up to 80 times more potent as a greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide. And there is somewhere between 1.5 and 4.5 trillion tons of frozen methane in the tundra, in the oceans, on the continental shelves, and in the peat swamps of the tropical forests like the Amazon and Southeast Asia and so on. And that's all being vented, as well as the stuff that we're venting with oil and gas mining. So, you know, there's a huge release of methane, and what that can do, it can potentially add 5 or 6 degrees on top of the 4 or 5 degrees that we are already on track for. So that's a 10-degree world. And really, that's not inhabitable. You certainly can't produce food under those circumstances. So, you know, if this runaway climate change starts, you know, we really are in a bad place, because there's absolutely nothing that humans can do to stop it. Once it gets going, once that methane starts to melt and vent, there's bugger all we can do to fix it. So this is a very serious thing, and I do not think that governments or the general population understand how critical is this particular risk at the moment. Okay, chemicals. Well, if you thought climate change was bad, let me tell you, chemicals are 5 times worse. The amount of chemicals that we emit in our daily lives, not just chemicals from the industrial process, but also just from you know, the actions of mining and farming and things like that, we change the chemistry of the Earth system. We release about 200, 250 gigatons, billion tons of chemicals every year. And of course, they're having a vast effect on the oceans, on landscapes. You know, that very large toxic effect is now starting to emerge, you know, in the form of cancers, brain damage. The human IQ is actually now going down at a rate of about 3% per decade. Now that's new science, just come out in the last few weeks. But, you know, we are becoming dumber. And one of the reasons for that is that we're releasing all these neurotoxins, and our children are being born already brain damaged. And as they grow up, they become even more brain damaged. So, you know, this is equally serious to climate change. It means we're so dumb we can't fix the problems that we've got. We're getting that way. So it's something that needs to be attended to. It's not regarded as being as big an issue as climate change. But let me tell you, it is. It really affects our whole future. And just to put it in perspective, 9 million people die every year from some form of chemical poisoning or other. A lot of that's air pollution. 9 million people, well, you know, that's 50% more than died per year in World War II. So this is a world war that's being declared on humanity, or it's being fought, and you know, we seem to be heedless of it. Food, as I've mentioned, climate is making it insecure. The loss of water, the loss of topsoil is making it insecure. COVID-19 has shown us that the food supply chains that we've got are breaking down left, right, and centre. The United Nations came out 4 days ago with a warning about global food insecurity, the worst food insecurity in 50 years. So you know, things are not well. If we can't feed ourselves, everything goes, basically. People who are not fed end up tearing down their governments. So you get a lot of government failure out of food crises. So, you know, this is an issue that is not being treated seriously by governments anywhere that I know. Basically, we need roughly double the amount of food that we've got now to sustain a population of 10 billion people on a hot planet. And we're going to get pretty much the reverse unless we change the way we produce food. And I bring to your attention a major report that is coming out from the Commission for the Human Future tomorrow. And it will talk about what is wrong with the global food situation and what needs to be done to fix it. And it can be fixed. It can be fixed quite easily, but we're not focused on it. So it's not happening, rather like climate. Okay, technology. Technology is off the leash. Artificial intelligence, universal surveillance, killer robots, newly made diseases. I'm not talking about coronavirus, but I am talking about some of the things that are going on in the biology labs at the moment. This technology is not being supervised by society. Humans do not have a say over whether or not these technologies are used for them or against them. A very small, powerful elite controls each of these technologies. There is no democratic control of them. So we need to worry about where technology is going, because it has no discipline, it has no morals, it only has a will to power. And you know, society must seize back control of these powerful technologies. It must demand oversight of them, or they will be used to dominate us. The other thing is that, you know, I think it was Voltaire who said the thing about humans is that they'll believe any bloody thing they want to. Right? We tell ourselves little fictional stories all the time. There is actually a biological purpose to that. I don't have time to go into it here. But beliefs generally are a very common thing. But let me tell you, there are 4 beliefs that are hauling us off the rails at a big time. The first one is money. We are using an infinite supply of money to destroy a finite planet. That's as simply as I can put it. We can always make more money. You know, they just print it, you know, in the central banks or wherever. If you borrow a bank loan, if you borrow to build your house, you don't go into the vault and get a sack of gold. They write you a check, and the check comes out of thin air. So if you're using money to exploit the environment, you're going to run out of environment and planet long before you run out of money. So money is a dangerous belief, okay? Nobody else has got that belief. Dogs don't have it, fish don't have it. You know, it's only human beings that cherish this particular fantasy. So we've got to be very, very careful about what we're doing with money. It's not real. Religion. Religion can guide people wisely and morally, but it can also misguide them in a bad way. And we need to refocus our religions on the question of human survival. And I think an example of someone who did that was Pope Francis with Laudato Si, which was basically a papal statement that said, if you look after the environment, the world will look after you, the earth will look after you, you take care of the earth. And that's good science as well as being good theology. Politics. There is no government on earth that is focused on human survival as we stand. They do not understand that they are at risk, that the whole of us are at risk. So that's a real problem. Our politics is focused on the 24-hour news cycle, maybe the middle of next week. That's about as far as it looks ahead. We are getting ambushed time and time and time again by drought, by bushfires, by pandemics. Classic example, there have been 5 pandemics since the start of this century. And you know, now we've got coronavirus, which is number 6. And we keep on being taken by surprise. We are totally unprepared to deal with the thing. And they're utterly predictable. That's the one thing. People have been predicting new pandemics since the 1990s. We know what causes them. We know where they come from, but we still wait until they hit before we do anything about them. Anyway, and the final one is the human narrative. You know, we tell ourselves stories today about unrealistic heroes, you know, who will survive the crisis and things like that. Well, from this crisis, there will be no survivors unless we start acting together as a species now. Okay, the good news is that every single one of these major threats has a solution. It has solutions which are compatible with solving all the other threats. We know what we have to do with climate, for example. Stop using fossil fuels and start planting trees. We can mitigate all of these risks before they become, you know, extremely dangerous. But we do need people to understand that they're all connected. You know, we cannot separate them. Here's another example of, you know, if we build a circular economy, we will not run out of material goods. If we keep on reusing and reusing our water, our nutrients, our metals, our timber and things like that, then we will never run out. So you can actually sustain humanity and you can sustain the civilization we have until the women leaders among us have time to lower the human population to a truly sustainable level. Now, if we want food security, we have got to start taking the water and the nutrients that our cities waste and turning them back into food. And there are brilliant ideas going on all around the world at the moment for how to do this. So, you know, green cities is not just polite talk, it's also human salvation. It's a really important thing. So getting these technologies right for recycling our wasted nutrients and water is a key to human survival. Now, Singapore is a leader in all that. I love that example. That's an architecture firm in Singapore that's designing villages for old people, for retirees, who they may have been bankers or IT geeks or something, but they become farmers. So they get healthy, fresh food, they get exercise, they get socialization, they grow food for their community. It's a nice solution to the problem, but it's happening everywhere. We all know we've got to go for green energy, but we've also got to go for renewable food. And we've got to go for endlessly renewable material goods as well. So these principles echo across all of the threat categories that I've mentioned. We know we can fix the energy problem. You know, it's not insoluble. We just need to go a little bit harder and faster and be a bit more ruthless about this. This is a revolution on which our future survival depends. We know we can ban nuclear weapons. How do we know that? Because we've already done it with chemical weapons. Okay, it's just that some people want to hang on to their fantasy of being able to bomb somebody else back into the Stone Age. But, you know, democracy has to take over here. World democracy has got to dominate these ugly governments that want to take these weapons, you know, and misuse them. But if they're there, some stupid government is going to use them. So we do have to get rid of them, and we have to get rid of their materials as well. Look, you know, if we really want to survive, the best thing we could possibly do is hand over the leadership to women. You know, women don't start wars. They don't cut down forests, empty the oceans. They don't emit nearly so much carbon as men. You know, they don't enjoy racing cars and things like that as much as we do. They don't wreck landscapes like we do. Women have a much more precautionary view of life. They're thinking about their children and their grandchildren. And really, that is the kind of leadership that we need in the 21st century. Not the old, you know, poison it, knock it down, burn it mentality of these modern cavemen who are still running the planet. Basically, we need female leaders in business, politics, religion, society, and then we will have a chance at survival. We also need more men who think like that, by the way. And there's lots of men who do, and I don't mean to, you know, disrespect those men who are, you know, very much committed to those things. But I think it is the essence of femaleness that humanity now needs to survive. We don't need the cavemen any longer. One way that we could communicate the situation we're in, I've suggested creating a human survival index, which is basically, it's like your Dow Jones or your weather report or whatever. It tells you whether the world got a little bit safer today or a little bit more dangerous. So it's a one number index that comes out every day on the media. It's on your iPhone, it's on your cereal packet, you know, it's everywhere. And it's telling you whether we're getting close to survival or further away from it. And I think unless we have that, people will not be motivated to do very much. They'll focus on the little problems, the day-to-day problems, the parochial issues. So we need an index that's compiled of all those things in the dot points there, basically. The Commission for the Human Future was established really as a result of the book I wrote, Surviving the 21st Century. It's an organisation, it's chaired by John Hewson. It's got a lot of very bright minds on it. And what we're doing is we're holding a lot of round tables and we're pulling together the best brains we can find, both in Australia and overseas, to say, what are the issues, what are the risks, and what should we do about them? So we're looking both at what you might call the negative side, what are the dangers and how great are they and how close are they, but also what are the solutions? Because we have to get those solutions into the heads of people all around the world. So the main thing is, you know, saving the human race is not just a job for governments, it's not a job for corporations, it's a job for every single one of us, working together, building our awareness, sharing knowledge, sharing wisdom at the speed of light on the internet and social media. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Julian. That's fantastic.